I'm going to talk to you about the Trend Unibase. Now, the Unibase is a really useful product. If you've bought a router in the past, it could be quite old, it could be one of the lesser known brands. When you're starting to use jigs and do jig work, we rely on what we call a guide bush. Okay? If your router that you've bought doesn't accept a lot of the Trend guide bushes or the sizes, then fear not, because you don't have to get rid of the router. We can put a Unibase on it and it makes it all compatible with all the Trend stuff. So we'll talk about that in a second. What we're going to highlight here is when you're doing jig work, what's really, really important, and some of you will know, some of you don't know, so apologies if we're trying to teach you to suck eggs, but what's really, really important is the alignment of the cutter, centering it as it comes out of the router and centering it with the guide bush. Okay? If it's not dead center, then we can get some inaccuracies, we can get some intolerances with the jig. That's best highlighted when you're using a worktop jig. Because you'll use different sides of the guide bush, if the cutter's not, if you can imagine, it's not concentric, it's not bang in the middle. If you're cutting a male and female joint using a worktop jig, you might end up with a very, very slight bow in it, where it's touching at each end, it's bowed in the middle. It's got nothing to do 90% of the time with the jig, it's got nothing to do with the router, it's how it's lined up, okay? Let's demystify it, it's very, very simple. You can buy these from Trend, it's like a little top hat, and you can buy, we're going to show you here, we can buy like this two-piece guide bush set. If you've bought a Trend router, a T10 or a T11, you will have it. It's quite simple, that it's stepped, this one here for example, goes into a 1/2 inch collet. So on the router underneath here, you've got your nut and you've got your collet. Literally all you do is say it's simple, we just push it in, okay? Just loosen it off, push it in, and that's as simple as it goes. Then all we do is we literally unlock it and we push it down into plunge. And what that means in there, when we look at it, it means that fits that hole perfectly and none of this can move. Then all we need to do is quite simply, we've got an outer piece and we've got an inner piece, and all we literally do is we just lock them all in. So I tend to lock the inner ones first because they're on countersink and that will locate it. And once they're tight, then we can tighten the outer ones. And once we've tightened the outer ones, we can be rest assured that the centre line of our motor, which holds the cutter, so therefore the centre line of the cutter is perfectly aligned with the guide bush. So now if you follow those simple procedures and do that little operation, you will find then that your jig work will become far more accurate. So now you understand how to line the cutter. Let's just assume that you've bought a router and it doesn't accept the Trend collets. Well, as we said, fear not, because you have the Trend Unibase. When you take it out and you look at it, it looks like a piece of plastic with all these holes. Okay. Also in the packet, we have a load of screws, all different sizes for different routers, and we have a plastic. It's not a guide bush as such. It looks like a guide bush, but this is just a setting up guide bush. And we have 2 pegs. So these pegs are 1/2 inch on the end. And basically on the bottom, they're 1/4 or they're 8mm. So it takes every size. If you've got a 1/4 inch router, you can set it up. If you've got a 1/2 inch router, we can set it up with an 8mm guide bush. We just push it deeper for the 1/2 inch, and there's for the 8mm. So in this router here, we know we've got an 8mm. So as you can see, just simply put the guide pin in. It's not complicated at all. What we've got to do is take up our setup guide bush. And as you can see, we've got countersink screws that are supplied, and literally put them in and screw them in place. And what that does, it just holds the guide bush in place whilst we're setting up. So once we've screwed these in, as you can see, you just literally screw it in, it locates it all for you. So we know that this is central to that plate. All we literally do now is we locate that onto there. So we know that everything is tight and central. Now all these multiple holes on the top are there for different drillings of different routers. So what we literally simply do is we drill it round and we just look, we spin it round, sorry, and we look until we actually find where we've got our 2 holes lined up. Then we have these flat-headed, dome-headed screws, dome-headed with a flat underside, and we just literally screw them in place. So once we've screwed that one in, as you can see, really simple to set up. You now have a base that will accept all the Trend guide bushes. We can take the setup plate out and you can then use every correct size guide bush for the correct size jig. Easy to set up, no problems, and you can now be rest assured that the centre line of your cutter and the centre line of your guide bush is in perfect alignment.